Hi and welcome back everybody, and I want to thank everybody for tuning into my videos. I know I'm getting some very loyal followers and I appreciate your feedback and input and loyalty when it comes to watching my videos. Today I wanted to take some time to talk about some techniques for practicing. And the reason I want to do this is because over the years I've come to realize that practicing is essential. If you're a musician and you want to get better, you got to be able to practice. And you got to be able to practice effectively. The problem is nobody really teaches you how to practice. So you have to learn this through trial and error and try and understand what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So I'm going to share with you today some of the things that I've discovered over the years and that have kind of made it easier for me to practice and to be more effective at practicing. The things that I've discovered and where I like to focus when I practice are three areas which I call tools, time, and technique. These are the three main areas that I think are critical for actually being more effective at practicing. And I want to go through some of those things with you today. So some of the tools that we have at our disposal today are very, very innovative, great tools that we all can take advantage of. The problem is, and the risk is, that oftentimes these tools actually become hindrances. And the reason for that is because they're distracting. And although we start off with good intentions, those intentions actually become distractions eventually. And so we have to try to limit the distractions that we know will entice us to lose focus on what's really important when we're practicing. So the key thing for practicing is consistency. So when I say consistency, I mean try and do it at the same time, in the same place, try to limit the distractions, and try to focus for an amount of time that's right for you. Some of us cannot focus for longer than half an hour. Some of us can focus for a few hours without any problem. So if you know that your attention span is rather short, there's no real point in trying to force yourself to practice for 4 hours a day when it's not going to be working for you. So try to do a little exercise and see how long you can actually stay focused on something. And once you have that time frame, try to limit your practicing to that time frame. That doesn't mean that you only have to practice, say, for 20 minutes. You can practice for 20 minutes 4 times a day if that works for you. But really, you don't want to try to stretch your attention span for too long, because after a certain amount of time, it becomes useless. The other thing is try to practice at the same time of day. And when I say the same time of day, you have to understand where you lie in the spectrum of are you a morning person, an afternoon person, an evening person. So for me, for example, I'm more active and I'm more creative at night. So I feel that my time is really the evening. So I prefer to practice in the evening. If I get up early and I'm groggy and I'm not a morning person and I have to have 5 cups of coffee to be able to focus, maybe the morning is not the best time for me to practice. So try and limit yourself to the time of day where you're going to get the most return on your investment of time. That being said, the other thing is tools, right? We mentioned tools at the beginning and how we have a lot of tools at our disposal today. One of the things is you got to try to limit your distractions, and you want to try and limit where you're spending your time. So there's a lot of great tools on the internet. There's applications and software and videos and all kinds of stuff. But a lot of these things actually sometimes take away from your focus. So if it's not critical to learning that new piece of music, that new song, or like solo or whatnot, don't try to look at other videos and other instruction material online. Try to group it so that it has something relevant to do with what you're trying to learn. If it's not relevant, save it. There's many ways you can actually save it. And YouTube, for example, you can save your videos for a watch later. You can make watch later lists, and I do that all the time. So if I find something interesting, I'll just click watch later, and I'll come back to it when I'm trying to learn that particular song. Now, one tool, if I had to pick one tool that I feel is the most important for practicing, bar none, it will be a metronome. And now you're going to tell me, what are you talking about? You know, there's so many great tools out there. I can learn how to play the guitar on my Xbox. I can learn how to play guitar through video and whatnot. That's true. But the metronome is the foundation of music. It's time. And if you don't have an awareness of your internal clock when you're playing music, you're not going to sound good. Whether you practice 48 hours a day, I know it's impossible, but you're not going to have what you need in terms of time synchronization to be able to effectively play either by yourself or with a band and make it sound good. So a metronome is critical. You can get a metronome today for not a lot of money at the store. You can also download apps that you can get on your iPhone that are, you know, free even, and you can have it with you all the time. So I carry my phone around with me all the time, and I got, I think, maybe 3 different applications in here for metronomes. And just turn it on when you're playing, be aware of the music, and be aware of the time. And whether you're playing along with, you know, a piece of music you're trying to learn, a solo, start slow and work your way up from there. Because the metronome will make you aware of time, and it will also make you aware of your limitations when you're playing. If you don't play with a metronome, you might be playing slower than you should, and you won't even be aware. Or you might not be playing in sync, and you won't be aware. So you're going to think, hey, I'm practicing great, this is fantastic, when actually you're not. So it'll allow you to be more aware of your shortcomings and be able to be tighter and more effective. So trust me, get a metronome. It's the best thing you'll do for yourself. Play with it all the time. Now, the other tools that are out there, such as iTunes and YouTube and Grooveshark, all great ways of assisting your playing if you use them correctly. The key is not to get distracted, as I said before. So if you're using YouTube, make yourself a playlist of the songs you want to learn so that you don't have to necessarily scour the internet and try and find the songs you want to learn and waste valuable practice time. Be organized. If you can organize your time, you'll get the more out of it, and you'll be able to get a lot more focused work out of your scheduled time. YouTube is great. The only warning I have for YouTube when you're looking at information and videos is that they're not all correct, so you might pick up some bad habits or some wrong ways of interpreting some songs. So you want to try and take it with a grain of salt and try and maybe compare and see how other people are playing the tune so that you know which one is correct and which one isn't. There's always that risk. Grooveshark is amazing. It's a great streaming service that you have online. The advantage with Grooveshark is you can make playlists just like you can in iTunes, but you don't have to buy the songs. They're free, so you can just stream them. So it saves you a lot of money. I use that all the time. The other tools that I find really indispensable, there's 3 main ones that I like a lot. One is called Transcribe, the other one is called Amazing Slowdowner, and the third one is called Capo. And I think Capo is made by Super Mega Groovy Software, something like that. So if you look it up, you'll find it. And these software programs allow you to take the songs that you have on your computer system and play them, and you're able to select a small section of the song and loop it, play it over and over again, and slow it down. So if you're learning to play that solo or that difficult part that's challenging for you, you can actually focus on that, play it slower, get it at a slow tempo, and then build it up from there. But at least you're listening to it properly, you're building up your ear, and you're learning how to play it, and you slowly will be able to pace yourself quicker and quicker, and it'll become easier, but you'll be playing it correctly. So that's the important thing. And it's indispensable if you're trying to learn this on your own. If you have the luxury of being able to use a teacher, then obviously some of the techniques that I'm talking about here will be slightly different. But really, the gist of the video is really to take it as a whole and not really pinpoint any specifics. Just trying to give you a global idea of some good techniques here. So the second thing is time. When I started, I said tools, time, and technique. So time is very important. We don't all have the luxury of being able to practice whenever we want. We have busy lives, we have family, we have jobs, we have obligations. So when you set aside some practice time, you want to be able to really maximize that time and not be distracted, as I said earlier. So how do we do that? Well, first is to understand how many songs we can actually learn effectively, how long it takes us to learn these songs, and set aside regular practice intervals. So, you know, some people will say, well, do I need to practice every single day? Can I practice every other day? Can I practice once a week? All of these answers to these questions are yes. I mean, what works for you will not necessarily work for me. But once you stumble on what works for you, stick with it. So if, for me, I know that if I learn a new song, what works for me is to be able to practice a song, I dedicate some time to it, and I take a break. Let's say I come back to it a day later. During that time where I'm not playing, somehow, subconsciously, my brain's still processing that information. When I come back to it a day later, it's actually easier. It's almost like my brain had to take some time to assimilate all the information, and it sticks. And every time you come back to it, more and more of it sticks. So you can give yourself the luxury of taking a break. You don't necessarily have to practice the same thing every single day. You can alternate. You can practice finger techniques one day, you can practice scales another day, you can practice a song another day, and so on and so forth. So you don't become bored, and you constantly keep different aspects of your playing moving and moving forward. But it's important to give yourself some time for it to sink in. The other thing is repetitiveness. So when you're playing a song, a lot of us have limited bandwidth in the brain. We're distracted and we're being bombarded by so much information every single day that when you try and put in new information, some of the old information gets pushed out, right? So unless you're constantly refreshing that, you'll forget. If you go a couple of weeks without playing a particular song, you're going to come back to it and it won't be fresh. You're going to have to, it'll be rusty. You're going to have to play it a couple of times to remember how it went and whatnot. If you play it regularly, the more often you play it, the more fresh it stays in your mind, and obviously the easier it'll become. And there's also something that's called, muscle memory. When you play a song or you play a solo X number of times, eventually you don't even have to think about it. Your fingers automatically know where to go. When you're playing in a band, oftentimes your brain is on autopilot. Your fingers just know where to go for that particular solo. That's because you've played it so many times that your muscles kind of remember how to play that song, how to play those chords, how to play that solo. And that's where you want to get to. You want to get to the point where you can almost put it on autopilot. I'm sure, very famous guitar players are like that when they're playing their solos. They're not always constantly thinking of what I have to play next. It just flows. And that's where you want to be at when you practice. That takes time. So that goes back to my time factor. You need to put in the time to be able to get to that stage in your practicing techniques. The other thing is the technique aspect is, you have to focus on the things that you don't know. This is something that I wish somebody would have told me a long time ago. It seems rather obvious, but I guarantee you, if you look at what you're practicing, you're not practicing most of the time what you don't know. I'd say probably 80% of the time you're practicing stuff you already know. You're playing songs you know. You're trying to learn the song all the way through. So you're playing the song all the way through over and over again. When actually the only part that's giving you trouble might be a 10-second part of that song or a 20-second part of that song or the solo. And the rest of it you already know, but you're wasting time playing it over again. So I'd say once you're comfortable with the song, break it down into the sections that are giving you trouble and focus only on those sections. Once you get those sections, then by all means play the song from A to Z all the way through, get comfortable with it and make sure it flows. But by doing that and focusing on the sections that are only giving you problems, you'll be able to not waste time, you'll be able to gain valuable practice time, and you'll get a lot more out of the time that you've put aside to practice. And you'll see that you'll advance a lot quicker because you're focusing only on those areas. So that's very, very important, and a lot of people don't know this. And next time you practice, pay attention to what you're playing and see what you're playing. Like really focus on what you're playing and ask yourself, do I need to be playing this right now? Or do I just need to focus on that little, verse or that little intro piece in the song? The other thing, the other thing is start slow and work your way up. So many times I see people trying to, they put on the record and they're trying to play that solo at the same speed as the record and whatnot. You got to start slow because you got to remember, it's got to sink in. So if you try and rush it, you won't retain it. Start slow, break it down. Oftentimes even like call out the notes as you're playing them, and it'll stick. Otherwise, a lot of times you're just basically memorizing patterns. You don't really know what you're playing. You just know that it's got to go in this shape and along the fretboard, and this is where I got to move. But what note is that? Why am I moving there? How is it relating to the chord that's being played in the background? By having a good understanding of what you're playing, it becomes a lot easier because it becomes logical. You're breaking it down. You're going into the mind of the artist when he actually composed the song so that it makes sense. You're not just mimicking. And that's the difference in developing good learning techniques, is you're breaking it down to the minute elements so that you really understand. I give you a good example. Some people say, well, how do I remember all the notes on the fretboard, right? And so a lot of times teachers, what they'll do is they'll just make you play the scales over and over again till it sinks in. But what students actually do, they just memorize the finger patterns so that they don't even know the notes that they're playing on the fretboard. They know where their fingers need to be, and they can kind of hear that it sounds right. But then if you ask them what note are you playing, they have no clue. It's because they're not actually learning, they're just mimicking. So call out the notes as you play. Call out the chords as you play. When you're learning a song, call out the chords. Don't just play the chords, call them out. These are all techniques that'll help you learn. And that'll force you to go slower at first because you're going to have to take more time to actually think about it. But it'll stick. It'll stick a lot faster. So you dedicate some extra time at the beginning, but you recuperate it at the end. When your friends are playing songs and they don't know even what key they're in, you will know what key they're in. And what progression comes next, you'll know because it makes sense because you'll have broken it down. So again, tools, time, technique, don't rush, get a metronome, and don't become impatient and don't get sidetracked. So use these techniques, and if you have any tips that might help other people, please post it. I'll put it down, and it'll help other people that are following my videos. And I'm always happy to hear other good suggestions that might also help me become a better player. I don't have all the answers, guys, but I want to share what I do know. So stay tuned. I have some other great videos coming up, and I want you to have some great quality practice time in the next few weeks, and let me know how it went for you. Stay tuned.